What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video we're going to talk about the best way to create terrains inside of SketchUp. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So this actually stems from a discussion I had with my students in the SketchUp Essentials course on the best way to create terrain. If you are looking for some additional help on how to use SketchUp, make sure you check out that course at TheSketchUpEssentials.com/course. But generally speaking, the generally accepted way of creating terrains in SketchUp is to use Sandbox tools. Now, Sandbox tools is a tool set that's built into the Pro version of SketchUp. You can enable it by going up into your settings right here and making sure that you have Sandbox tools enabled, and then you can activate it by right-clicking in the menu section and clicking in the option for Sandbox tools. Note, Sandbox tools is not available in the free online version of SketchUp. But generally speaking, the way that people do this is they've got a number of different contours, and they can be things that you've brought in from a CAD software. I think I brought this terrain in from CAD Mapper, actually, or you could draw your own contours. But basically the way this tool works is you can select those contours, and there's an option for from contours. When you click on it, what it's going to do is it's going to create a surface from your contours inside of SketchUp. And this is actually a fine way of doing this if you just need to create a fast terrain. But the problem is this creates this terrain using triangulation. And so if you were to go to View, Hidden Geometry, and look at the topology that this creates, it's actually a really messy mesh that can be a little bit difficult to work with. And notice what it's doing is it's coming in here and it's basically triangulating all of the different points and surfaces in here in order to create a surface. And you can't really see any of this when your hidden geometry is off, but the problem is it doesn't really create a very good mesh. And so you get a bunch of these weird kind of like shading artifacts and other things like that, which again, depending on what you're trying to do, might not be that big of a deal. And so you can totally use Sandbox tools, but if you want cleaner meshes with a little bit better result, there's a different tool that I recommend. And so Toposhaper is an extension from Fredo 6 that you can download from the SketchUpEssentials plugin store. And basically what this is this is a better tool for creating surfaces in here. It's kind of one of those things that feels like, why would I want this when I have Sandbox tools already built in? But we're going to take a look at this and I'll tell you why it does significantly better. Now, one thing to note, this is a paid extension. I'm not like an affiliate for Fredo's extensions or anything like that, but I think that Fredo's extension bundle is 100% worth it. But you can either get the perpetual license for Toposhaper for $12, or you can get his bundle of 8 plugins for $40. His bundle of 8 plugins is going to come with awesome extensions like Joint Push Pull, Curveloft for creating surfaces, just a bunch of really great extensions. It also comes with the, I believe it comes with a tool that allows you to draw smoother curves in SketchUp, just a lot of great tools. So generally speaking, I recommend this bundle, but if you just want Toposhaper, you can do that for the perpetual license. Now, one other thing to note about this, you do also need to make sure that you've installed the extension libfredo before you try to install Toposhaper. You can download this either from SketchUpEssentials' website and install it using the extensions install extension, or you can also install the SketchUpEssentials extension store directly inside of SketchUp and then download the extensions that way. But once you've done that, so enable libfredo, then you can install Toposhaper, and it's going to give you a couple options that look like this. And so the cool thing about this is it's actually got 2 options in here. So you can either generate a terrain from a point cloud. So if you have point cloud data, you can use this in order to generate the terrain from that. Or you've got the option in here to create your terrain. Let's go ahead and let's do that. So I'm going to hide this Sandbox tools terrain that was already created, and let's go ahead and let's use Toposhaper in order to create a terrain. So the first thing you do is you select all of the edges that you want to use for the terrain. But then you come in here and you select this first option. And so first off, what it's going to do is it's going to put you in this screen, which allows you to select and exclude any objects that you don't want. So say, for example, that you didn't want this piece of terrain right here, you could select it and click on the option to exclude the contour. So if you have a little bit of like extra data in here, like for example, I might not want to use this, I might just exclude that. And notice how when I do that, it's going to turn dotted, meaning I know that it's not going to be included in my terrain. But once you're done cleansing, the next thing you can do is you can calculate your terrain. Now, one thing to note about this is if you are working with reference elevations, or you want this to actually like align with real world elevations, you can go into the edit altitude and you can set a reference altitude and also the altitude increment. So for example, if I wanted these to be at a certain height, you can come in here and you can type in something like 510 feet. Hit the enter key. Notice how then what this is doing is this is basing all of these on that 510 feet as your kind of like base lowest elevation. Now in my case, I'm not going to do that, but you can use this in order to set the altitude increment, as well as doing things like you can use this to set your reference altitude and your altitude increment. But now what we want to do is we want to go back to the calculate terrain option, and this is where you can see the power of Toposhaper. So if you look at this, you've actually got two little screens right here, and so one of them is generating a quad mesh. So if you look over here, it's got a bunch of little boxes. Well, what it's doing is it's using those boxes and it's overlaying them over top of your contours like this, and it's using that grid in order to create your mesh. So if we zoom in here, we can actually see what that mesh is going to look like this. And notice how this is generating a much cleaner mesh. But the other thing about this is also a little bit more precise, because instead of having like crazy triangulation running all the way across these big surfaces, you've got this kind of like smaller grid that's just breaking the surface up between. And you can adjust how this handles the hilltops in here. Usually I leave this on rounding, but one of the cool things about this is if you want your mesh to be more precise, you can actually adjust the grid size too. So if I was to type in a value of 100 right here and click on done, notice how that mesh is actually going to get smaller and therefore more precise. So if you look at this, notice how this is going to generate this with the smaller quads in here, and it's just significantly better topology. And so the other thing this is going to do is this is going to create a skirt under your terrain like this. Okay, so then if I click on the Generate Terrain button, what that's going to do is that's going to take me into a page where I can edit this. Notice how I can do things like including or excluding the skirt. I can include or exclude the contours, as well as including or excluding a two-dimensional contour map, so a flat version of your contours, which can be very valuable if you're like exporting to layout or something like that. And notice how you can set if that 2D, 3D contour is above or below right here. You can also set the number of altitude labels that are created in here. So in this case, we're set to 100%. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to toggle this on. I'm going to go ahead and toggle my contours on as well. Then I'm going to click on the button for Exit Tool. So when you exit the tool, notice how it's going to create all of those things. And so if we look at this terrain, so if we go to a View, Hidden Geometry, and you look at this, notice how this has a much smoother quad mesh. Well, if we go back in there and we unhide the terrain that we created earlier, and we'll kind of move it off to the side here just so you can kind of take a look at this. Notice how the mesh that's created in here is much smoother, and it's also much more detailed than the one created by Sandbox Tools. Then you could take this and you could do a number of different things, like you could still use things like the stamp tool and other functions, because this is a triangulated surface, in order to do your additional editing. But in general, I recommend that you use Toposhaper in order to do your terrain creation in SketchUp. Alright, so that's where I'm in this video. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you're using Toposhaper. I just love having that conversation with you guys. If you do want to learn more about how to use SketchUp, make sure you check out my course. I'll link to that on this page. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.